Hello, and welcome to The Hump with Katie Thiroux. I'm your host, Katie Thiroux, and I'm bringing you interviews with some incredible artists, finding out why are they so amazing, how did it all happen, and what can we learn from their journey. Before we get started today, I'd love to thank our sponsors, and first up, we have Kolstein's. You guys, Kolstein's is my most favorite string shop in the entire world. They have 2 amazing locations and an incredible online store. They're based in Long Island, New York, and anytime I'm in New York City, I go out to Kolstein's to see what new things they've got going on. They do instrument repair, they build instruments, they make bass bibs and rosins and strings. They pretty much do it all, and they're so knowledgeable. They're giving our listeners a 10% discount. If you use the promo code Katie10 at Kolstein.com, you'll get 10% off your entire purchase. That's Katie10 at Kolstein.com. Okay, and next up, we've got Jams World. You guys know how much I absolutely love Jams World. I'm wearing a new one right now. And it's a clothing company that's been family owned and operated in Honolulu, Hawaii since 1964. I absolutely love the fabric because it's 100% spun crushed rayon, and that's why it keeps me so cool and comfortable when I play, because you guys, I sweat a lot when I'm playing up on stage. If you go to jamsworld.com and use the promo code Jazz15, you'll get 15% off your entire online purchase. That's jamsworld.com, Jazz15. I'd like to remind you that I'm bringing you brand new episodes of The Hump every Wednesday, every Hump Day. So download and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and go follow us on Instagram at The Hump with Katie. I have an amazing lineup of guests for you in 2021, so you don't want to miss a beat of what's going on over at The Hump. Every week, I'm excited and thrilled to bring you these interviews, and I just want to thank you for listening and watching and commenting and just being involved. And it's a real honor for me to get to speak with these artists and share the knowledge with you, because that is what it is all about at The Hump and in life. So thank you so much. I've got an amazing lineup for you in 2021, so stay tuned. But we're ending 2020 strong. This just tops the cake for me. I got to speak with my great friend and musician, jazz pianist, composer, educator, and film scorer, Justin Kauflin. And I know him pretty well, so this was a fun opportunity for me to just get to ask things that I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about. His relationship with Clark Terry and Quincy Jones. And if you haven't seen the documentary he was in called Keepin On, you have to check it out. It is timeless. I think you can actually stream it for free on IMDb through Amazon Prime. I'll have the links down, of course, below. But Justin is just such an amazing human being and real salt of the earth. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Justin Kauflin, and we'll see you in 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. Well, cool. Thanks. I'm going to be so professional right now. Thanks for joining us on The Hump, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, sometimes I ask people this, but what does The Hump mean to you?
Well, in terms of music...
yes, please.
Yeah, it's the groove. It's totally the groove. Right now, I'm definitely thinking more of it's Wednesday and it's Hump Day.
Yeah, and it's like, can we just have this holiday already?
Yeah, can we just get there? But no, that's what it's about. I mean, that's what you look for, I think, in any music that you listen to. You're looking for that hump.
Yeah, definitely. Even classical music, everything.
Everything's got a groove to it. It's just in terms of finding out what that thing is, and I love it when people refer to this thing as the pocket. Because it's something that you fall into when it's established. For me, when that thing happens, then you can sort of do no wrong. The notes they still matter, but when you have that feeling, I think it supersedes a lot of other things that you tend to worry about.
Exactly. Like I was playing along to Bernstein doing Beethoven's Third.
Oh yeah.
And like playing along to it, I was like, oh wow, this is a whole other experience. I'm like, oh, it's so expressive, and I can tell right away when I'm listening and it's not him conducting. Like if Matt puts something on and I'm like, turn this off.
Hear it.
Well, cool. I feel like we're going into the pensive, Justin. It's like when they explore Voldemort, we got to go back.
I was about to say, is this where we're going to go into our Harry Potter theories? That's what I signed up for. So.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I won't hold you on too long today, but I just kind of want to always, as always, start from the beginning. And I know you started off, I guess like a lot of people, playing violins. And how old were you when you started doing that?
I think I was 4 or 5. Yeah, so it was early. And we did the Suzuki Method. The story really is that my parents were trying to find me a piano teacher. My older brother and sister were taking piano lessons. Their teacher was a little hesitant on working with a visually impaired student, which is understandable. That happens sometimes. But I think it was my grandma who sort of found out about this violin teacher who did have experience working with visually impaired students. And her name was Suzanne Schreck. And she was a phenomenal teacher, especially working with younger students. But with the Suzuki Method, I mean, she gave me all the tools that I value and use on a daily basis in my career and in my life, really. I really can't say enough good things about that method, I think. And as well, just it's a well-rounded system. The memorization, the ear training. I was even doing sight reading. The way we did it for me was they would take the sight reading book. I can still remember what it looked like even. And we'd blow it up to like 200 or 300%, hang it up on the refrigerator. And that's how I would kind of like walk back and forth. But it covered all the ground.
Like when people say how music education is so important, and even if you don't go into music, but especially I feel like that's that Suzuki Method. It's like you can go on and be study math or science or whatever, but having that experience, like practicing something until it's technically perfect, but learning how to practice really.
Big time. We had the red light, green light system.
Yeah, I had like the sticker chart and.
Oh man.
Yeah, had to get my star.
She hooked it up. She really did. That was key, and it's funny too because I'm working on some other things right now. I'm working on a film project, and I got really fascinated with what I had at hand, what I could record acoustically, what instruments I had. And, my parents played guitar, so we have a couple guitars, and I have my violin, and I pulled it out of the case probably for the first time in I want to say probably 15 years. It was a bit of a shocker. It still works, but it has also been kind of nice to see what's still there. But yeah, I'm very thankful for it. It's cool to be able to kind of grab back at it actually after all these years.
I feel like you probably sound way better than I do if I went back to play violin. I'd probably end up smashing it on accident.
Well, I tell you what, one thing is, and playing the acoustic bass, but with these stringed instruments, man, they're so unforgiving. Because I was messing around the guitar, and it's got the frets, and intonation is not as much an issue, but man, messing with that violin it's brutal. Because I think now, when I was a kid, I didn't care, I sound good. I can play fast. Nothing was ever in tune. It was just like a disaster. But playing it now and landing on a note and being like, that is not what I intended.
Yeah. It's funny, like when you're older, how those inhibitions, everything's different, right? Oh,
big time. Kind of wish I could go back to being a kid in some of those ways. Where it's like, okay, go up and perform, and it's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I know. I was always first in line, like at a master class or something. Like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it.
Oh, what happened?
So why did you switch to piano?
I think it was always my first love. Even before violin lessons, the reason they were looking for a piano teacher was that I just had this affinity towards the instrument. I don't know. It's kind of the stereotypical story of I would reach up and just try to figure out whatever I heard on the TV or on the radio, and the piano was right there. So I'd go over to it, and I'd be 2 or 3 years old, and so I just had I definitely was gravitating towards it from an early age. Thankfully, they eventually did find a piano teacher who had experience. That was Virginia Cowan. And I started taking lessons when I was 9. And it was still the classical route. We worked out our own system because while I was getting classical piano lessons is when my vision really deteriorated quite quickly. So she was there to help me figure out new ways to learn. And it was, we had to be patient. I had to be patient because she could only show me so much in one lesson. I'd go home and practice it. It was all by ear.
So I know, I'm sure, I'm wondering, and other people are too, like, even at those lessons, are you recording them, taking them home and reviewing them, or are you just memorizing what's happening?
You know what? I should have. No, I just memorized it. That didn't occur to me till high school. I remember because I was in a magnet program, and my violin teacher there was like, "Oh, you need a recorder. You got to bring something, especially with the violin, because you got to get the articulations and the bowing and all of that." So it's a little more.
It almost has nothing to do with being blind either. Like everyone, it's hard to remember all those details.
It's a lot. But she hooked it up, and it during those lessons is when I was able to find out, like, oh, okay, I really I like this. I like Bach. I like Chopin. That started to grow.
Yeah, and I think you're really modest, and we'll talk about Keep On Keepin On too. But I love the clip when you're playing piano at a recital. So, because I don't think people understand. You had to not just memorize it, but you had to learn it without the music. And you were used to that by that point. But like, how long would it take you to learn and memorize a piece?
It was. I think the slow point was really how much I was able to like get from my teacher during the lessons. But like to learn that Chopin piece that I played in that segment, it took at least a few months. And I remember that piece very well because it's a waltz, and it was kind of more in kind of rondo form. It always went back to that main dun, 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 dun. And I was like, all right, I just want to get to the ending though. That's all I wanted. I wanted it, and I remember it vividly because I when I heard it, I thought, wow, is it like it's crazy that it's possible to play something like that. It sounds so cool. And I just couldn't wait to find out whether I could actually do it. And then she showed it to me, of course, nice and slow, and I picked it up. And then it was so thrilling to be like, I can do this thing that I actually kind of thought was impossible. Just this flurry of notes. Chopin was good at that. These phrases that are like, what is even happening? I don't even know. It's so chromatic. It's so flashy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would take a while. I think learning Braille in high school, especially Braille music, expedited the process greatly with the classical music, where I could actually finally do things on my own time.
What does like a Braille, like a piece like Chopin look like?
It's long.
But is it telling you like the notes in your left hand? Like how is that working?
So there's actually different formats. My preferred method was section by section. And the way it would do it is, I don't know where I have the well-tempered clavier somewhere in here. But I don't know, say a piece is broken into basically 10 chunks. And what you do is you see the right hand for that chunk, and then below it in another paragraph kind of is the left hand in a chunk. And you see the symbols that tell you like it's right hand, that's left hand. And, you got to think the interesting thing about Braille music is that it's converting essentially a picture, right? Music is a drawing on a graph, essentially. So in order to get all of that information still sort of in a text format, is the challenge.
Yeah.
There has to be a symbol to tell you what octave you're in. There has to be a symbol to tell you, of course, you have a certain part of the braille cell, the 6 dots, certain part of it. The top part tells you what note it is in terms of letter. And very weird. I've never had this explained, but the letter D is C. The letter E is D.
Oh, no.
The letter F. And I think it's in terms of they needed to do that so that it left more room for all the other symbols that needed to be expressed, because you have all the different rests. And then the 2 bottom dots in a cell basically tell you what the value of the note is.
Wow. So that's a lot of information to take in, just like for one measure.
Well, and that's something that took me a while to get my head around too, is that like a 16th note looks like a whole note, but it's a 16th note because there's a bunch of them in the measure,
Yeah.
It's like you have to do a little bit of reasoning, deductive. You're like, okay, wait a minute, let me look ahead and see what's going on here. But yeah, there's a symbol for every bit of detail that you need to get so that you have what you need, and then after the note usually is where you'll see any fingering notation.
Wow. I mean, and of course you have like a recording to kind of reference, but that's still, that's a lot of information to take in.
Yeah, it was good though. I mean, for me, it was liberating because then in college, we'd pick the pieces I was going to learn. I could get it all down before the next lesson. So I could actually spend the semester talking about how to perform it, as opposed to, okay, here's the next measure, So that was kind of, really great, because I got to work with a wonderful teacher, Gary Kirkpatrick, and I actually got to study with him in terms of like, oh, this is how you play this piece.
Yeah. So when did I know you grew up in Virginia Beach, and it's not a small town, but it's not a huge town.
Yeah.
And so what was your first exposure to jazz music?
Middle school jazz band was the first time. Before that, the only thing I have that I could remember associating with jazz was the Wynton Marsalis, like the Lincoln Center, with like, so the orchestra will play it and now the jazz band will play it.
Oh, okay.
And we all remember it because they always like the camera always goes to the kids in the audience. Some goofy some goofy things. But it was jazz band, and so it was still like I didn't know, but I had a cousin who was going to Radford, Jason, and he was studying saxophone and actually getting into jazz. So while I was doing sort of faux jazz, I think we played like a cute, the chart for cute and take 5. Oh boy, we were swinging. He was kind of hipping me a little bit to the real book and, what he was doing and showing me some licks. But yeah, it was, that was the intro sort of, and I'm like, oh, I know what jazz is. Then I auditioned to get into this magnet program, and I wanted to get in so bad. I auditioned on violin, I auditioned to classical piano, and then in my ignorance, I was like, oh, and I'll audition for jazz and I'll play some Scott Joplin,
And how did that go?
Well, thank God there was no actual jazz faculty judging it. So it was the classical faculty, and they were stoked. They were like, oh, well, he's visually impaired, so maybe the classical piano thing would be a little tough. And I would agree with them too, because so much of that curriculum is sight reading and accompanying other students. So my jazz piano teacher told me, she said, when they came to her, they were like, oh, we found this wonderful, he was playing Scott Joplin. And she was just like, no, man.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. What a bummer. But thankfully it did work out. And that was probably the most excited I've ever been. Like just jumping in headfirst into the jazz world with great teachers. I'm so thankful for every one of them. It's a small department, probably 20 students. Liz Barnes was my piano
Governor
teacher.
School?
Governor School. Yeah, Governor School for the Performing Arts. And it was the people that I still go out to see when I can see live music here in Virginia. Mm-hmm. Liz Barnes, Woody Beckner, Chris Bridge, Jeff Smith. They're real musicians. They really do play and they really actually know the music. So I was very fortunate to come across that situation, and really I just remember I couldn't get enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, this is this new, extremely wide world of possibility, and I didn't feel hindered at all by the fact that I couldn't see.
And that's amazing. And at that point, did you even know? Was it so new? Like, did you even know anything about form, like about jazz form or anything like that?
We were introduced to it by a lot of the bebop standards. Mm-hmm. Or in Autumn Leaves was one of the first, and I remember that vividly because learn the chord changes, and Liz showed me sort of like the Bill Evans rootless voicings. So I was practicing those, going through all the keys, and in terms of soloing, it was more like, as a pianist, I think it's a little easier to be able to make those connections, just chord scale. Mm-hmm. And the form, just understanding I think that's what excited me so much, was like, oh, there is this form. It's a repeating form. Once I realized and the way the solos work, the way the structure of the performance works, when it was explained to me what two feel was mm-hmm. versus walking bass line, all these things that you're like, what is that? What are you even saying? And the feel was probably the thing that was the hardest to come by for me, coming from the classical world and not really having any of that kind of stuff in my background.
Yeah.
Even as a child, like what music I like to listen to. And we were going over Autumn Leaves, and it was, I was my turn to take a solo, and I was playing, and I thought, man, I think this sounds really good.
Yeah.
I think I'm finding it, just in terms of being able to make it through it and playing something cool. And then she stopped. She goes, well, what are you doing over there? What is that? Little Johann Sebastian? Like it was just so square. It was so it was a good, lesson. And I think, really immediately after that, she was like, go home, transcribe Wynton Kelly. This is the thing that you really need to learn and grasp mm-hmm. is the feel, and play along and figure that out. And she had me do that with so few words. She just said, go, you have Kind of Blue, right? And I said, yeah. She goes, well, go learn this note for note. That's it.
Yeah. I know those are the best teachers. they're great teachers, but they're not going to show you what Wynton Kelly's doing. Nah, they're going to tell you to go figure it out.
She knows it's all there.
Yeah.
And she knew I would pick it up. So it was just stuff I'm very grateful for. And I think she was a great teacher for me in that, like, I'm realizing now I work best with the people that essentially she would laugh at me, mm-hmm. and make fun and kind of take me out of my just internal freak out.
Yeah.
It's like when somebody's laughing at you, it really does take you out of your thing. And, I think I'm learning how much I value that.
Yeah. At that time too, like, so you're getting, exposed to jazz in a good way. Were you a voracious listener as well once people started pointing you in the right direction?
Yeah, I was a Napster fanatic when it was illegal.
Yeah. I won't submit this to the FBI.
Man, I tell you what, I would do anything I could do to get my hands on something, So yeah, one of my favorite tracks of all time is Bill Evans playing "Here's That Rainy Day," mm-hmm. And that was one of the first tracks I downloaded. And this is back in the day where it was like, you're talking like a 3 megabyte file.
Take like 3 hours.
You're just sitting there like, please, 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 please. And then it stops. And you're like, no, please keep on going. Like, I need to finish this file. But I discovered a lot through that. And I'm actually very grateful for just the local jazz programming that we still have. You know, Jay Sennett is the guy who has been doing jazz for the NPR affiliate here in this area. And I think it, alongside getting some info from my teachers, you know, telling me like, oh, you know, check these guys out. I was getting it by just listening to his program for hours. You know, he was on from 9 until 1. So I'd listen from 9 until I fell asleep, basically. And I heard Art Tatum for the first time, you know, never having had anybody tell me really about him. It was the 20th century piano genius. Was it? Yeah, something like that. 20th century piano. Anyways, it's a house concert that he did. And I think this is another kind of cliche, but it's totally valid, because the experience of listening to him was that just can't be one person. There's no way that's one person playing the piano. And there's a reason why people always say that. It's because it's mind-boggling. So I just couldn't get over it. I remember hearing that for the first time and having that. And then when Jay got on and was like, that was Art Tatum, I'm thinking, and who else? Like, please tell me there was somebody else playing that. And also pretty much blind as well. Art Tatum. I mean, I always wondered why every time he does a gliss, he always lands on the top C. Yeah. And even if it's not in the key, right? It could be an A major and he'll still hit that top C. And I think it's just like, it's a blind thing.
That's the
boom.
end.
Yeah. Keith Jarrett, Whisper Not. I remember hearing that on the radio and being like, I got to have it. I got to get it. Because I think I was learning Whisper Not, like the actual song for class, and then hearing him playing it and being like, oh, how come he's not really playing the melody like we're learning it?
Yeah.
You know, and how because he takes liberties around midnight, you know, baffled me for a while. But it was that type of thing where I could listen to these records and then take them into class, put them on the boombox, and ask my teachers, like, what's going on here? Like, Keith is just comping, the bass player's walking, you know, like, is somebody supposed to be soloing? And then they could explain to me, like, no, that's a walking solo.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, like, okay, I'm hip, you know.
Yeah.
I know what's going on now.
Well, and that's the great thing. It kind of doesn't, wherever you grow up, there, I feel like every city has their pocket of, you know, great teachers and great players, like you did too.
That's the key, you know.
You don't have to be in New York or Los Angeles or a huge city.
Well, the people that we look up to, none of them were, you know.
Exactly.
It was because somebody maybe that was a little more hip traveled to their area and exposed them to it. But everybody always had that local contingency of guys that did understand the music, didn't you know, pursue it to that extent, or I don't know. It's definitely more a global thing, and I think nowadays even more so.
Yeah. Because
of the way things are accessible, and it's, you know, find those people. I think that's the key, is just to find the people around you that are just a little bit more further along or have that experience.
Yeah, and I think it took a little bit longer for the jazz community to kind of emulate that, but it's like always, like for kids who are into rock, it's like, oh, there's that older kid who plays guitar and he's so cool. I want to like hang out with him. But it's not as cool if you're like, oh man, that guy's playing blazing bebop lines. I want to hang out with him at lunch. But you know, it kind of is now, because jazz, it's got that like nerdy culture around it as well.
It sure does. Yeah.
So you sorry, I have a Christmas Eve tomorrow. That's what just came up on my iCal.
Oh, okay, good. I was also trying to stay focused because it popped up on mine as well.
So obviously you know, progressed really quickly in high school during with piano and playing jazz, because you got into William Patterson University, which it only takes one. You only have like one piano player, right, in that program? Yeah.
Well, it's a small program, and the thing about it is it's kind of like a sneaky program because it's in Jersey, but it's like 40 minutes outside of New York City. So most of the faculty are people that are teaching at MSM and New School and Juilliard, but they're adjuncts, so they can go where they want. So a lot of them end up at William Patterson, and that was attractive. It was attractive because, I don't know. I don't think I really wanted to go to a music school. So that worked. And the thing that really was the clincher for me was I went to go visit all the New York schools, and on the way home, William Patterson has this thing they call it the Dialogue Day, where all the bands get to perform for each other. I know you guys had that at Berklee too, right? And so I saw like the Juilliard kids perform. It was awesome. I mean, it was so clean, and so well put together. And it was funny too because they were playing the music of Donald Brown. Okay. And he's definitely like a part of the William Patterson family because all those guys, James Williams, Harold Mabern, Donald Brown, they're boys. So saw that, visited New School, had a buddy that was going there. It was, also had a lot of, I mean, it was so loose, and it was kind of cool to see all these people that I was like, oh man, he's here, that guy's here, and that guy's just walking down the hallway, you know. And they were cool, but when I visited William Patterson, it was nice to be in this room, and James Williams was still alive. He was holding court, and Harold Mabern was there, and they're giving the bands advice, giving them the criticism and encouragement, but telling stories all throughout. And I think that's what did it for me, because it created such a warm atmosphere, and obviously the bands really did sound great to me. I remember being like, whoa, they're swinging, but it was such a good community vibe that I was getting. So I was like, yeah. And it ended up being a very good fit. Yeah.
I'll say, yeah. So you went there, and Mulgrew Miller was the head of the department for you at that time. But as you've told me before, he wasn't giving lessons.
That's right.
And it's kind of like as a piano player going to a school, Mulgrew's there, and he's not giving lessons. So what did you do to circumvent that?
So, yeah, he came on my sophomore year because James had passed right before my freshman year. So we didn't have a head of the program. And then we found out Mulgrew was coming. And me and my buddies, of course, freaked out. But yeah, no piano lessons. He was working with the ensembles. And that was kind of his main thing, He wasn't giving lessons, but I do know people that kind of pushed so they could study with him. I kind of got the vibe that it didn't feel, because I know he did give private lessons, but I think he felt like his time was better spent working with the bands. And so I honestly didn't push in that way, but I did have this encounter where, you sign up for who you want to study with the next semester. And so I was like, I do want to study with Mulgrew, but the way I pitched it was I kind of wanted to just be able to have lunch with him and chat with him about just advice, career stuff. And it was just a funny thing because he found out, he was like, and he emailed me. He says, I see you're trying to sign up for, private lessons. And I was like, oh, please don't be mad. Yeah. Please don't be mad. I don't want to be sitting at the piano. I just want to talk about all the other stuff, basically. And then he was cool with it. And I found that to be extremely valuable. Just getting, I think that was how I was able to stay in touch with him after college. And any time that I had a question, I could call him. And just, the first time I was getting ready to record my CD, the only people I really talked to was Mulgrew and Clark Terry, Like, please help me figure out how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm freaking out. It knocks me out too, because I called Mulgrew, and you know how you have your heroes.
Yeah.
And so I called him, and he answered, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I'm just at the grocery store." And I'm like, "What? You're at the grocery store?"
Yeah.
I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah. Well, I remember kind of like you're saying, like how there's such a camaraderie at William Patterson. I remember, like, before I met you, because I was in New York for the just like visiting for a few days in the summer, and I saw William Patterson, your ensemble, playing at one of the JVC stages, right. And I was just like, just how you felt too. I was like, oh my gosh, Mulgrew Miller is just sitting right behind that piano player. Like, that's so cool. Like, because I could surmise that, like, this is his ensemble, but I was like, I have never seen that before. Like, could you imagine, I don't know, like Oscar Peterson sitting, but, you know, like teaching his ensemble and sitting right there. Or, I was just like, that's so cool. It's
a vibe. You'll like this too, because at that thing, because it was a summertime thing, right?
Yeah.
JVC Jazz Fest or something. We're sitting, because it was like outside of a church, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we're chilling inside, getting ready to play, and I don't know. The guitar player was like, "Mulgrew, you know, like, what you've been reading, or do you have any recommendations?" And he recommended the Autobiography of a Yogi.
Oh yeah.
Yogananda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh man. So of course I went home and picked it up immediately. So, what a beautiful human being. Mm-hmm. I mean, I every time I think about him, I just can't get over it. Just these people. It's that thing of I don't know. And I don't want to. I'm not saying he's a holy person, but there's something that I always find with people that are just so good, so humble, so have all the right stuff. Mm-hmm. I think
so generous too. With
they don't
time.
have to say a thing. Yeah. You know, it's just there. You can feel it. It's definitely almost a tangible thing. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's why I bring up holiness, because it's like the truly holy people are the ones that are never calling attention, to themselves in any way, and then you just, when you're around them, you feel better. It's that vibe, and it's like, man, that was Mulgrew for sure.
But he would be really generous with you guys too, with his time, and I know, like, he would take you to gigs.
No, after college, I had seen him. I'd go basically to see him every night he performed. Mm-hmm. So if he was at the Standard and he had 2 nights, I was there 2 nights. To the point where if I didn't show up to one of his gigs, he'd be like, "Oh, I was worried,"
Yeah.
"Hope you're okay." I'm like, "Oh, I'm back home in Virginia," or something like that.
Yeah.
And one gig I thought was hilarious. Me and my buddy Billy went to go see him at this club that was trying to do jazz up in Harlem. And I forget what it was called, but Mulgrew was playing like the late set. He was playing from 11 to 2. And we were like, let's go. Let's go see it.
Yeah.
And actually Billy got to sit in, which was thrilling,
Yeah.
And at the end of the gig, we were kind of having this discussion, like, all right, how are we going to get home? Billy was like, man, I don't really want to walk to the subway.
Yeah.
This is pretty sketch right now. It's 2 a.m. And I guess Mulgrew heard us and he goes, "Oh, I'll give you a ride home."
Wow. Yeah.
Where are you? Whereabouts are you? And I'm like, it's just next level stuff, man.
Yeah. It's just one of those people. They're just real people.
Yep. Real good.
I of course I want to talk about Clark Terry, but also, we could talk about Keepin On forever. But so you finished William Patterson, and then you stayed in the area, right?
Yeah.
Were you in New York or? Okay.
DK.
But I don't want to spoil the movie for people who haven't seen it. Which, by the way, everyone should go watch Keepin On. But how was it received? Because I know that was like a point for you in the film that you eliminated, and I had never thought of this before. But people have their own misconception of, well, maybe Justin can't read my music, so I'm not going to call him, or it might be too difficult. So like that happened, right?
Yeah, and I think it was a combo of things. One thing that I can look back on and realize is that for me, getting around, especially right after college, was pretty challenging. It was overwhelming to try to figure out, like, oh my gosh, okay, the subways and the fear factor was very high. And I know that part of the issue is if you're not always around and visible, people aren't going to be like, oh, this is piano player, I think he's in town, So I know that was a factor. I tried to get out as much as I could, but like I said, I was pretty just frightened. That's why I ended up getting Candy, my guide dog. And she helped a little bit with that for sure, just to get me out. Because I was like, man, I'm in New York, but I'm too scared to leave my apartment. It was a drag. But yeah, I started to get that impression when I was getting out a little bit more and doing just jam sessions, where the most common thing that would happen is somebody from the session would be like, oh, I did bring some of my own music, but they're like, and kind of pointing at me.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of be like, well, why don't we give it a shot?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, but it's like in 9/8 and it's pretty tough. And I'm like, I mean, just whatever. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
Exactly.
I can't make it. And like, yeah, I would be able to learn it. They'd be really surprised. But it would be just a constant repeating situation.
It gets tiring after a while.
Yeah, it did get pretty tiring. And then, of course, some of the other issues that I was running into is things that I think everybody working and living in New York trying to make it happen deal with, which is you have all your friends from college and they're like, I got this gig. It doesn't pay anything.
Yeah.
Can we do 5 rehearsals? Yeah. And I'm like, man, how am I going to pay rent with that?
Yeah, I know.
So all these other dynamics, there's no better way to learn that stuff though. And understanding like, oh, like there's all these other aspects that go into being a musician that I think in most cases you do not get in school.
Of course. Yeah.
You have this impression that if I practice enough, I'll get the gigs because cats will hear me. It's like, no, cats are worried about their own issues, figuring their thing out and also networking for themselves. There's so many other dynamics. And that's why, I think you see I would say like some of my more aggressive classmates who I was like, oof, boy, man, they really push, They end up doing well.
Yeah. Because
they understand that if you're not in these people's faces, in the best way possible, I guess, they're not going to know that you exist.
Yeah.
They're not visiting you in your practice room. To be like, oh, I hear what you're working on. Wow, that sounds good. I'm going to hire you for a gig. It's like, no, it's not the real world. So yeah, spending that time in New York was a little painful, but also extremely great to learn that stuff, I think, right after college. Like, oh, school continued,
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now we can get on to Keep On Keepin On, because it's such a I'll never get over how fascinating this film was, and it was one of those things that happened. It just happened at the right time, and everything just came together for the better of, like, for all the right reasons. And I can't believe that it happened and how great of a documentary it is. And it really documented Clark Terry, who's like, speaking of another holy person, just a beautiful, beautiful soul. And I just can't get over the fact, like, this was Al's first. Well, anyways, it's really crazy. So you guys started documenting that just as a way to have like Clark on film, just like this. He's saying all these cool things. Let's just video it, right?
That was it. First, it started with having recordings because it was like all these stories about Dinah Washington and Ella Fitzgerald and playing baseball with all these guys,
Yeah. And it's kind of like
Williams,
for those people like Clark, that's like every other sentence is something like, wait, what? Wait,
yeah.
Really?
Oh, big time. Big time.
So you're still at William Patterson. You're still in school.
We met Clark. Oh, I met Clark also in my sophomore year. And he was like an unofficial sort of would come by and play like the with the big band every other year or something like that. Like a friend of the school, I guess you would say. And my buddy Al Hicks was very well, quite connected with Clark and the family, and was there. He was going on the road with Clark when he was touring, and sort of helped take care of him and make sure he was getting everything he needed. And Al is a drummer at the school, so Al and I hit it off, and he wanted me to come by, spend time with Clark, to help him because he was going blind, and he needed somebody to kind of help him through that process of things going darker and darker. And we formed a small group so that he could come into the school and work with us once a week. He was 85, 86, doing this. And these things, they really would. They would go on forever. They would be 4-hour sessions. And we'd all go back to his place, listen to records. Gwen would always have a bunch of food set out, his wife. And that was the vibe. Then we graduated. Al went back to Australia, where he's from, and I think what happened is there was a broadcasting, I don't know, like their version of probably NPR or something like that, BBC, that wanted to do a short clip on Al and Clark's relationship. And I was like, man, you should come out to the States. We should hang with Clark. And they were like, oh, we don't have the budget, and they kind of fell through. And so he was like, well, how hard can it be? Maybe we'll just do it ourselves. Yeah. And him and his buddy, Adam Hart, decided to just kind of move to the States again, get a nice camera, and they started learning just how to even film and capture things. And I was there for that whole process of learning. Yeah. Trying to do interviews on the A train. It's like, this is not going to fly. Yeah, you can't hear anything, But the main objective was to get all of his stories documented, really for archival purposes. And I guess it just started to develop more and more. They decided to do a Kickstarter so that they could continue to travel and visit Clark where he was. He had moved to Arkansas by that point. With Gwen's family is from there. So, but nothing. Even when Al approached me, says, oh, we're doing this thing about Clark, and since you're one of his students, would you mind? Can we just start following you around? And I was in my New York apartment up on in Washington Heights, and I just remember thinking, like, I mean, God, man, you'll have nothing to film, dude. Nothing. I have no gigs. It's
a heartbreaking story.
I don't know what I'm doing. So, but whatever, if you want to, it's your funeral, I guess, that kind of thing. And they're good buddies, so I didn't mind. Yeah. It's like, well, we'll at least go get a good bite to eat, after we're done doing this nonsense of them filming me and Candy kind of walking, down a sidewalk. And of course, Candy just like darting towards one of them because she just wants to say hello. Yeah. It's like, no, Candy, you got to be professional.
We're on camera, Candy.
But and then things just kept happening. I'm sure they thought they were going to film for maybe a year or two, but it ended up being 4 years. Yeah. And then all kinds of things happened where they were like, okay, this is going to be the end, And I don't want to like spoil anything, or if you haven't seen it, but there's definitely some dramatic moments for me where they're like, oh, once he gets through this, like, that'll be a great ending. Yeah. And then, of course, I kind of like ruined it. But, of course, because the film had to keep on going, the only reason we met Quincy is because we were still filming. By the time we had that chance encounter with him later on.
Because Quincy just wanted to see Clark.
He just wanted to see Clark. He was doing a thing with Clark and Snoop Dogg, because they're both from St. Louis, and he wanted them to do this, Clark doing mumbles and Snoop sort of rapping, and it was all going to be over a blues. And that
ever happened, by the way?
I think it did. I think it does exist. I've not heard it. Okay. But yeah, I should probably hit up Al and see if he's got it. But yeah, that was why he came down. Snoop, this particular trip where we were actually at Clark's when he decided he wanted to come down, Snoop like injured himself playing basketball with his son, and kind of just was like, I can't make it this trip,
Mm-hmm.
So we got Quincy all to ourselves. And I mean, even after being around him and knowing him, looking back on that one day is like, whoa.
Yeah. Because at this point, you guys, I mean, you're just kids, and you're like sleeping at Clark's house, right? You're just like on the couch hanging out. You're practicing.
Yeah.
And then here's Quincy Jones. Did you know like who he was really in entirety by that point?
Through Clark, I did.
Mm-hmm.
Probably had a better idea of Quincy and his stature. I mean, of course, everybody is familiar with Thriller, and I know he had done jazz things, especially through Clark. It's funny, let's say I thought I knew.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
He definitely was a big deal. I remember us being backstage at the Blue Note upstairs, and Clark was on break and digging into some food, and somebody from the Blue Note is like, "Oh, Clark, Quincy Jones is on the phone," and I was like, "Whoa, that is badass."
That is badass. Like even I can imagine like Quincy, having someone call the Blue Note, but how cool is that? That's so old school too. Yeah. Like I know where Clark is. Time.
Yeah. Oh, he's playing. Let me go ahead and give him a shout. Yeah. And so that was well before, we met him. Mm-hmm. But so definitely, and being aware of him through Clark, was good.
Yeah, and it's just so nice to see. I mean, every music form has this, but I feel like in jazz, David Wong was talking about this too. How John Clayton's like, only in jazz like do grown men hug, but it's so nice. Like you can just see like. I don't know how many years they knew each other, like 60 years,
Yeah.
And just like that, brotherly love between the two of them.
It's big time.
Yeah.
I always recount this, but I never get tired of it because Clark was very close with Oscar Peterson, and again, he was at the table and just decided he wanted to call OP.
Mm-hmm.
And he picks up the phone, and it was a chance. So, he calls him, and what I hear, I didn't realize he was calling Oscar. I should have figured because we were listening to the duo record,
mm-hmm.
like, oh, he's going to call his buddy. But what I hear is, hey, just wanted to call, see how you're doing, say hello, tell you I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I wanted to introduce you to this little friend of mine, And then I talked to Oscar for a little bit and was tongue-tied.
Yeah.
And he was so articulate. It was wild.
I know the way he spoke.
So gracious too. Yeah. Man, again, that warmth just kind of like emanates from these guys.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing really that stands out the most is how freely Clark would say something like that, and you knew it meant something. It wasn't a throwaway phrase. It wasn't like, I love you, like, oh no, he called him to tell him that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, that real authentic thing that the camaraderie, the community, there's no replacing. I mean, in my mind, that's what makes the music matter so much more,
mm-hmm.
or so much more meaningful. These are not just guys playing a song together. These are guys that actually care for each other playing a song together.
Yeah.
And that makes it all way different.
Totally. Yeah, it runs way deep. I don't want to take too much more of your time, Justin, but I will. So, I mean, obviously doing the film and especially meeting Quincy was a life changer because he ended up putting you on his world tour. And I mean, I will say, this is just, as the kids say, IMHO, in my humble opinion. The film kind of like re-elevated Quincy's status.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was already at the top, but it really humanized him too. And he wasn't even in it for that long, but it's just like, man, he's just this really, really nice guy.
Definitely. He's always kind of been this figure in everybody's mind, especially in the music industry. I think you're very right, just in terms of, oh, there he is. And him as a student of Clark's, and also as this person that I get to interact with and talk to, but also, I mean, really to see their relationship. And it's like, oh, he's really good friends with this guy, Clark Terry. There's definitely something to that. I would agree. Yeah. Because he is, man, he's so, again, he's another person who's just like, we've been around him enough, he's come out to our gigs.
I know. It's just like, who does that? Like, you can't even get your friends to go to your gigs.
This is true.
And there's like Quincy and like John Clayton, like people like that. They're just
JC, man.
They get it. It's like you have to, just like Clark, like how the movie starts off. It's like someone. Well, he didn't have a good teacher, so he like made it his life mission to give
and be present.
Yeah,
and be present. These kind of things. I love that I'll always be able to tell like the story of him coming into our gig at Betty Hoover's.
Oh yeah.
And he's just like. He's in the front row and he's just like, Candy, Candy. And we're like playing, and he's like, Candy Man. And then he sang other things that are, oh man, she's a pimp. Like, that's real deal. That's this warm, beautiful, another beautiful human being,
Yeah, like 100% real all the way. So I just want to talk about maybe two more things, but
no worries, Katie.
I mean,
this is Harry Potter and then Star Wars, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotta do it.
But touring for you, I mean, you've been kind of pretty much, I mean, except for this year, but steadily on the road. Would you say since like 2014 or 13?
Yeah, about that.
So what
6 years.
What was that adjustment for you? I mean, so first of all, you've had to adjust to living in New York, which everyone has to adjust to that, but then going on the road.
It was tough. I remember even this is kind of going back a little bit, but like sometimes I would fly from home to Jersey to go to school. And you know me very well, Katie. Like, I'm an anxious fella, but yeah, the flying thing freaked me out forever because the things floating in my mind were, oh my God, like when I land, will there be anybody to help me? Like, is somebody going to show up? What am I going to do? Okay, and then I got to get to like the cab. And I got to interact with that guy and figure out how to get me back to the college. And then, of course, it's like, when we get back to the college, how do I tell them exactly how to get to my dorm? Colleges are like a nightmare, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's no address, for my dorm. And so for the longest time, I mean, really, it wasn't a phobia, but it was definitely a great source of anxiety. And then when things started to pick up and traveling looked like it was going to be more of a regular thing, again, it was like, oh man. But you know what, the thing that made the difference was I did get stranded in Paris. I did get lost in Amsterdam airport. These things happened and like life moved on. And it's really a matter of I guess everybody has their own kind of things that they're working through, but for me, anytime it's something new and slightly unknown is where a lot of my anxiety comes from, where I just like, I can't handle all the things that I don't know how they'll go. But then you do it. You're like, oh, all right, this is all right. We've been in strange hotels.
Yeah.
Just like, what is this layout? How does this make any sense? There was one in Europe that where like, it was just so strange where basically the shower was this like tube, that you could step into, but everything else was just in the room. Like,
oh, that's like the wake up.
Yeah, it's
like a spaceship. Yeah.
Yeah, and you learn. You get hip to it. I mean, it maybe took a little longer for me than it would for somebody sighted or whatever, but you know, we've gotten, now it's like my greatest passion, you know.
Yeah.
When we can get back onto the road, and I'm not even talking about touring, I'm just talking about points. I'm talking about miles.
Yeah. But I bet you're happily surprised by like the humanity. I'm sure you're disappointed too, but like sometimes like someone will ask you, hey, do you need help? Or I know you've had some cab drivers that'll like walk you into the airport, and it kind of is like, oh, people are nice.
And it goes both ways too. I've had both kind of experiences, but I would say it definitely leans more towards people aren't all shitty, you know. Some of them are pretty cool. and when they are cool, they're actually very cool. But, you know, we've had both experiences where I'll get into the airport and I'll stand for 20 minutes and start freaking out because I'm like, man, I don't know where to go, and nobody. And of course, at least 100 people will have walked by me, you know, and I'll do all the things where I'm like, you know, just doing whatever I got to do to let people know, like I'm clearly a lost blind person.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a drag. And then there's been other situations where, somebody is just so hip and will be there to get me all the way from the door to the gate. You know, there's definitely, there's all kinds. There's just, that's all it is. And always be thankful when you run into the ones that are good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of like when I first met you and we were with, you know, some people. I'm like, man, no one's even taking into consideration, like, just be like, even if you weren't blind, it's like, just be like helpful. Yeah.
Oh man, that was a good time though.
That was. Matt helped you out with your little situation there.
air sick. Oh my God. Or no, what's called altitude.
Yeah, but I will say you're a great traveler, like on the airplane, because I remember when we were flying into Aspen, and you were asleep, and man, this plane was like going. Maybe it was Colorado, somewhere in like maybe Denver or something, and I was like, oh my God, we're going down, and there you are, just like snoozing.
It's one of my, like, I don't consider myself to have very many gifts, but I think being able to sleep on an airplane is one of my favorite things to be able to do. Yeah. It's valuable, and there's rare occasions where I am awake during the flight. I'm a very angry person, so I'm like, this flight is so long. Have we landed yet? Oh my gosh. But you know, this is totally random, but I had a flight from Virginia to New York, short flight, you know, and I was asleep before we took off. And then I woke up and everybody's getting off the plane. And I'm like, oh, and I'm like thinking, you know, okay, I need to ask for help.
Yeah.
I'm like, so what did you want to do? And I'm like, just, you know, get help, and I'm going to grab a cab. And they're like, no, we're back in Virginia.
Oh gosh.
Like, we had to turn around. I'm like, oh man, I missed that. Shoot. It was like bad weather, you know, they weren't able to land or whatever. It was, we're good at sleeping.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you've also gotten into, I mean, you write, you're an amazing composer, and I should say you have like 4 records out, or maybe 5, including your Christmas records.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is about 5. Yeah.
Look at me, I'm on top of it.
Hey.
But now you've gotten into a little bit deeper in film scoring, and I know you're. We talk about this all the time, but like, you know, you're so interested in John Williams and just classical music and like breaking it down as well. So, just really briefly, like, walk us through what it's like to, you know, you can't see what's going on, but you're scoring it.
Well, let me tell you, every time I've done it in the past, it's always been slightly different. One benefit that I've had until now is that I've been working with Al, you know, the director of Keepin On. And so we've been able to have our own little back and forth about how to make things work. And that's been cool. I think it got me a little bit familiar with the process. But we're really jumping into this project that I'm working on now. Is much longer, and we'll have a lot of things that I need to catch. And what we're doing now is actually I have somebody who's going to help me in breaking it down and spotting it out. So I got the first cue, and it's like from 1 minute to 1 minute 22 is this part of the scene. Then for the next 9 seconds, it's this section. And it's going to be specific time code, and I'll be putting markers everywhere they need to be, and working on each cue in its own way that way. And what's good is that as long as I have a dialogue with this person, we can establish. She can start picking up things visually throughout the film. We're talking about like, oh, every time this happens, visually, we might want something to be represented within the score. So we're working that out and kind of coming up with a shorthand. It's the combo of that. So that's like the technical aspect. And then it's just really me getting the best sort of sense of what the vibe is. And I picked it up with the dialogue, with who's talking, what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And with that combo, I mean, I think we'll see how this goes. Quite honestly, it is a lot. I do feel much more confident in that, like, oh, okay, not being able to see the picture it doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means I need to figure out a new, unique way of addressing those issues, making sure things are hit. And it's like, well, I can't use my eyes, but I can certainly use other people's. Like, does that work for you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Show them, play
and
for
you're
them.
visualizing what's happening.
Exactly. I still am quite a visual person. Everything that I experience is definitely in the visual spectrum, just in the imaginary visual spectrum. But yeah, the film that I'm working on, I already have images in my mind, and based on what people are telling me, but also just based on what I pick up from what I feel when I'm watching it. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. And it'll be that type of thing, like, okay, hopefully it'll go well.
Yeah. But and just tell us really quickly, because you're also, what programs are you using?
I use Logic. So I use everything is on the Mac, and Logic is my main rig. There's a few accessible options these days. Pro Tools is quite accessible for the blind. Logic works, and I think Reaper works for folks. But Logic works the best for me, for my workflow. And then something that I use within Logic is a thing called Complete Control, which is made by a company, Native Instruments. They make a lot of really wonderful sounding things. And it kind of makes Logic feel more like a keyboard to me, because all of the controls are on the keyboard, where I don't have to use the computer keyboard as much. And then I'm able to, get around, browse for sounds, because most of that stuff is usually completely inaccessible otherwise. People just get used to the fact, like, oh, just click with the mouse. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. So yeah, it's a constant work in progress, but especially these days where we're not touring.
Yeah.
We're not playing. So looking at these other options is definitely, the way to go. Got to be flexible.
Yeah.
As long as we can still be doing music.
Yeah, exactly.
In some form or fashion,
Speaking of that, do you have anything coming up in 2021 that you're thinking about, or?
Man, it's hard. I'm sure I'm still going to be doing streaming.
You've been
I have my
champion.
YouTube channel.
I don't know how many you've done now.
I realized that, of course I wanted to do like Christmas stuff, and I wanted to do all this. It's so much easier to plan that stuff 3 months in advance than to be like, oh, that was too much.
Yeah.
That was too much. But yeah, it's been great, because it just gives me at least some sort of way to perform, even if it's like very small and very sort of low key. Just getting into that mind space of, all right, first take, That's it.
Yeah.
Just get up and play, do your best. If it doesn't go well, too bad. It's a gig. So
Totally.
I'm hoping to grow that and do some different things, maybe some more explanation type things. So I would say just check out just my YouTube channel. I guess it's just Justin Kauflin Music.
Yeah, yeah.
And then hopefully we'll be able to sometime in 2021 be able to get back on the road.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Do you have anything in the books right now?
Well, maybe I'll be in Denmark in March, but I'm just crossing my fingers basically. And then if that doesn't work out, hopefully July. We'll see if these festivals are able to come back.
Well, if anyone can do it, I think it's Denmark.
They can do it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's we're just staying afloat. We'll keep busy. Hopefully get back there, do some stuff with you guys.
Well, I would love that. Very last question. What's because I know you have a big wide spectrum of music that you enjoy. So anything you're digging on right now? It doesn't have to be new.
Yeah, let me see. Well, I was telling you about this last week, but Bruckner. Bruckner's a new exciting discovery for me. I'm going through Bruckner's 7th Symphony. What else is floating around? It's been weird. As I'm working on the film score, I've been listening to so many random documentary soundtracks and things.
Ooh, yeah.
So those are floating around and very synthy.
Yeah. Oh wait, sorry to pause, but I do feel like I need to ask you. I completely forgot. When you're playing with a bass player, what are you listening for? Or what is it?
Okay, when I'm playing with a bass player, I guess it's in going with the theme of the hump is really the feel. When we're playing, really, how does it feel? What's the pulse like? How do I need to sort of adjust what I'm doing? It's kind of weird. Like, how does what they're doing make my eighth notes? How do they feel?
Yeah.
And then it goes into like listening to note choice in the way that like, okay, everybody has their preferences, I guess, of how they like to take things. And for me, being able to suss out like, oh, they like to, they like to adventure a little bit, So for me, like that kind of helps my left hand figure out, oh, let's do some different things, But I mean, first and foremost is just how do we feel, and of course, that the note and the definition. It's funny, I think, especially when at the first time, just being able to hear what the notes are.
Yeah.
Sometimes is a challenge,
Yeah. Especially
when you're on stage. And kind of listening in for that, it was funny to do a few things with John Clayton, and to have that sound and that like incredible, like, oh wow, every note is crystal clear.
Yeah.
It's something that you don't get all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just big time. It makes it that much easier for me as a pianist to make those adjustments instead of doing the guesswork. Like, oh, is that what he meant to play?
Yeah. Yeah, I know he's one person that every time I've ever heard him, it's always, for lack of a better term, it's always right. It's just, it's there. Big time. Oh man, can't beat it. It's a special feeling, I'd say. Keeps you on your toes, and also to be propelled like that, I think is really, it's weird when you're playing music, but you feel almost this physical thing that's pushing you. Oh, totally.
Into like I don't know, propelling you forward through the music, but also just like the energy of what's going on.
Yeah, it's like someone's like has a hand on your back pushing you forward slightly. Yeah.
Like, oh no, you could play a little bit more. I know you could get a little more out of that instrument.
Dig a little deeper, yeah. Yeah, that's such a fun feeling, and it doesn't happen, that often. But when you play with those masterful people, you kind of like you've done it, so you're trying to get back to that.
And it's not because they're playing loud.
No.
I think it's really an intent thing. Mm-hmm. There's so much focus. There's so much just like willpower going into every note choice, every beat. That it's that intensity that really makes it, because we all play with loud people.
Yeah.
And you don't get that same feeling. That usually you just get that drowned out feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, nothing I do will be able to meet what's going on around me, as opposed to, oh, I need to rise to the occasion, because this is the level where the music is at.
Mm-hmm.
This is the intensity. This is the focus that they're bringing into what's going on right now, and I'm not even close.
But you feel it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, Justin, that's a high note. I'm gonna leave it there on a high note.
That sounds good, Katie.
Yeah, and I'll have all your links down below, so everyone check out your records. They're available everywhere, and we'll look for you live in 2021 on YouTube.
We're hanging.
And I really appreciate you taking the time today. This was kind of a little selfish for me because I wanted to dig deep on some of those, on the beginnings, go into the
Hey, oh man, I appreciate it. Oh, it's always fun. I'm looking forward to getting into. You sent me a nice little gift, a little holiday gift.
Oh yeah, very healthy holiday gift. Hey, and we're gonna group watch Santa Claus tonight on Disney Plus if you want to get in on that.
I might get down with that. Shucks. Yeah. But we do. We need to do our bonus episode at some point. We got a lot of thoughts.
It should be like how you remember, like on Green Day, they'd have the secret track and it'd be like Big Bird. So I'll just let this keep playing for 5 minutes and then it'll be da 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 da.
We got to talk about Dobby.
Yeah.
Dobby
and Winky.
Winky.
Butterbeer.
It's just in the closet. Oh my God. Or the room of requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. No, we can go deep. We can go real deep. So I'll wait for that. I'll eagerly await that episode.
2021.
All right, Katie.
Well, cool. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
You too.
Bye.